Good morning, welcome back to the Celtic Way. I am your host, John McGinley. Today I'm joined by Tony Haggerty. We're here to chat through all sorts of Celtic news. Tony, it seems to be ramping up the kind of stuff to talk about with regards to Celtic. There's players coming in, there's players going out, there's managers talking, there's pre-season training, there's a match on Friday. It feels like we're starting to get into pre-season proper here.
Yeah, very much so. Yesterday was a bit of a kind of hectic day, wasn't it? Greg Taylor left. There was the kind of wonderful message that he sent, the takedown of Chris Boyd, and then there was the manager's update later on in the evening, which I really enjoyed, John. You know, you just
Yeah,
like to be kept informed of what's going on, and he covered a whole range of topics there, didn't he? Covered Osman, he covered Nygren, he said that Michael Essien was involved in the signing of uh, Nygren or Nygren, I don't know what way you're saying it or how we're pronouncing it. So correct me soon enough. And a quick apology. I think I said Moussa Dembele was signed for 50 grand on yesterday's podcast. Of course, I knew it was 500 grand. I'll put it down to rustiness and being away for 2 weeks. So I apologize for that. Anybody that dug me up on that, but yes, I didn't know it was 500 grand. Don't know where 50 grand came from, but there you have it. To err is human and all that. But yeah, it does feel, John, doesn't it, that we're getting it all back together again and that the kind of lull is over. We are
yeah.
now back to business. I don't know if that's the way you feel, but certainly the way I feel. And you feel good about that, don't you? Because the manager also said that he expects more business. So I'm quite excited by that, John.
Yeah, he did. We'll come on to Rodgers in a minute. We'll dig into some of what he said in his interview. He did his first full in-depth interview of pre-season with Club Media yesterday. I think first we'll tick off the Greg Taylor box because he has officially left Celtic to join PAOK on a 3-year deal. He wrote a message on Instagram, as he said. I'm not going to read the whole thing out, I'll just read out an excerpt. But he said, "A chapter of my life that I will never forget. My experiences on the pitch have gone beyond anything I could have imagined. Just as importantly, off the pitch, I've grown as a person. Celtic truly is one of a kind. Every time I pulled on the shirt, I gave it everything. What an honour it has been to wear the hoops. I've loved every minute and have never taken it for granted." Greg Taylor phoned Brendan Rodgers, I think, a few weeks ago and told him of his final decision that he would be leaving Celtic. Rodgers again reiterated that he would have liked Greg Taylor to stay, as he stated on multiple occasions publicly last season. But he's gone for a new lifestyle, Tony. He's gone for a new life in Greece, and we wish him all the best. He's won 11 trophies with Celtic. I think he's been an important part of the success over the last few years. I think especially true in that 2022-23 treble winning season. I think Greg Taylor was one of Celtic's standouts that year. So nothing but good thoughts for Greg Taylor.
I don't think anybody will look at an inverted fullback the same and not think of Greg Taylor. Because he kind of, in a Louis Walsh style, he made that role his own, didn't he? You
Yeah,
know, particularly that season. And I think he's been a wonderful servant. People couldn't argue the toss about his strengths and weaknesses and merits as a player. But I think when he tweeted or he put on Instagram, lived it, loved it, I think there was a feeling that the writing was on the wall there, wasn't there? We thought
yeah,
seeking a new challenge. And despite the manager saying he'd love him to stay, I think players just sort of think to themselves, okay, I have lived it, loved it, won 11 trophies, been there, seen it, done it. And I think he was just curious to see what was out there for him. I've nailed my colours to the mast very firmly on this very early, John. I said until I was going to leave, and because that was the information I received, and I trusted that, and it turned out to be true. So I'm very happy about that. Happy for Greg Taylor. If that's his wishes, then I think he goes with the best wishes of the Celtic supporters. And I think the manager alluded to, and I've always come back to what Gordon Strachan always said, that you can be a good player, but you can also be a good teammate. I think they're very popular in that dressing room, very vocal character, well liked. And I think Greg Taylor was the epitome of everything that was good about Celtic. He was a good teammate and he represented the club magnificently on the park and magnificently off the park. When he did the interviews, and he was put up to the media quite a lot, he had the
yeah. He
Greg
was. Yeah,
he had the Greg Taylor stare, didn't he? He didn't like a question. He just kind of, and you knew something was coming. I wouldn't say it was like barbed comments, but you knew something was coming down the line when if he asked a question and he just kind of gave you the stare first, and then you thought, oh, here we go, he's going to say something. But I think he goes with the majority of Celtic fans' best wishes and blessing. And as I say, you can argue the toss about his merits, strengths, and weaknesses as a footballer. But he said it himself when he pulled on the jersey. He gave 100%, and that is all you can ask for from any footballer that signs for the club.
Yep, Hazel Finn saying you can't blame GT wanting to try a different lifestyle at this time in his life. Great servant, wish him all the best. Alan Hughes saying as well, best of luck to Greg. He came in for a lot of stick at times, but in his opinion, always gave his all. He did come in for criticism. There was issues around whether he was the calibre of player we needed in the Champions League, etc., etc. There was always a fair amount of debate around Greg Taylor. But I was always a fan of him, and I think that season that I talked about, the 2022-23 season, just solidified in my mind that he was such an important member of this squad, a leader in the dressing room, a leader on the pitch, and actually quite creative, a creative force for Celtic and Celtic's build-up play. Quite consistently, I would suggest as well. And yeah, if you don't know, Tony reported the Taylor to Pauk news a few weeks ago. But while Greg Taylor was sunning himself on holiday, Tony was left sweating a bit of whether it was actually going to go through or not, and whether he got that one right. But he did in the end. So fair play to Tony as well. Yeah, we wish Greg Taylor all the best. Now, let's get into what Rodgers had to say. A few interesting notes from his interview. It was like a 15-minute interview. Like you say, I think it was good to hear from the manager to that extent. We've not heard from him since the end of the season. I was speaking about this with Hamish last week, but Celtic supporters just like to be kept informed. Again, I don't think there's a massive inquest. Nobody's demanding answers or anything like that. Things are going good at Celtic, so it makes sense for Celtic to communicate that and communicate their plans and how they're feeling about things. I think it all makes sense. So I did find it of value. One of the interesting things, he kind of hinted at a kind of tactical tweak, Tony, and taking away what he said was the predictability of the team. I'll just read out some of his quotes here. Is one where we, especially in the early stages, that the physical preparation and getting the players prepared mentally is right. They don't come together as a group until later on, but we've seen the benefits of a really good pre-season last season. And for us, from a tactical perspective, it gives us the opportunity as well to make little tweaks in terms of how we work to keep improving and keep taking away the predictability of the team. Our notion is always to play attacking football, and I think last season we scored the most amount of goals of any team in all competitions in over 50 odd years, but our notion is still to be better and to improve, and that's what we look at over the course of pre-season and preparation. So nothing, obviously he's not going to go into detail on that, but what are you thinking the tactical tweaks might be? I mean, for me, and I've spoken about this a fair amount, it makes sense to me that's an allusion to Kieran Tierney coming into the team and playing a different fullback role to Greg Taylor, Benjamin Niang coming into the team and playing a more connecting role in attacking midfield, perhaps a change to the kind of 4-2-3-1 formation that we've seen during Brendan Rodgers' first spell, a move away from the 4-3-3. Are those all things in kind of your mind heading into the new season, Tony?
I think the biggest thing there was the P word, predictability. It's all very well recycling the ball. He talks about that a lot, but I think the ball wasn't getting to the forward positions as quick as Brendan Rodgers would have liked it last season in certain games. And I think we all felt that, didn't we?
Yeah, we did, yeah.
It was laboured at times, wasn't it? Possession was laboured. It wasn't very quick. And when they did do it quickly, they carved teams open. So I think Brendan Rodgers says, right, you can do this. So we need to tweak that and we need to get the ball to those areas quicker, which is probably why Nigrin's been brought in. To maybe do that. And also, I think he also wants people to get on the end of it. So Osman as well. You'll find out what Osman's about soon enough, in these pre-season games. But I've got a feeling that's what it is. I certainly concur with the Kieran Tierney. Kieran Tierney, what was his forte? It was bombing forward. And
yeah, he's very direct. He's much more direct than Greg Taylor. Yeah. And again, we've talked about the strengths of Greg Taylor there, but I think Tierney does add a different, more dynamic, dimension to that left side. And I think Celtic will be more direct and exciting on the left side now.
Yeah, and you saw in the cup final, didn't you? It was very laboured, wasn't it? And I think Celtic cut through them once when Dijsselmeyer ran through in the last few minutes and should have scored with a chance that he was taking all season. So I think the manager's noticed that, and it's good that he's noticed that. But I've said before, you have to listen to what he's saying and read carefully what he's saying. And he's telling you, signposting that, isn't he? We will be less predictable, we'll be less laboured, we'll be less slow. My teams play at pace. But also pointing out the fact that, and I think you've mentioned this in one of your articles too, that they scored the most goals.
Yeah.
And so he's caveating that with, look, we did score the most goals, but I still want it to be quicker, I want it to be faster, I want it to be slicker. And I think most Celtic supporters would agree with that, wouldn't they? That would have been the big bugbear of last season, that they dominate games in domestically, but a lot of it was laboured, wasn't it? Possession was laboured and recycling.
Definitely in the second half of the season, Tony. Yeah. I think. So I looked it up, and I think it was the most goals they've scored since the 1970-71 season, or the season before, depending on how you want to count the Dryborough Cup. But I don't count the Dryborough Cup. So it's 1970-71. So yeah, 54 years. But I think and my point was quite similar to Rodgers, is that he's going to look for more beyond that. That's just a number ultimately. That's just a marker. It doesn't particularly tell us too much about the style of play that Celtic had, especially in that second half of the season where predictability was the word.
Yeah.
And there was frustrations, especially against teams with a low block. You know, speaking to people who have watched Benjamin Niang play, they reckon he might be that kind of creative force that can help break down those walls. There's a video up on our YouTube channel about that as well. Brown Warrior saying here, we've become too one-dimensional. Certain teams have our number now. Tony, I can see changes in shape this season becoming a factor. I hope KT will offer that. I've got a sneaky suspicion we might see a little bit of a change in shape in the Celtic team as well, but we won't really know that probably until deeper into pre-season. We might see inklings of it against Queen's Park. I guess we'll find out on Friday, won't we? We don't have too long to wait there. But yeah.
My thoughts are as well, if that's the way Brendan Rodgers is talking, then he's going to clearly bring in players or recruit players that fit that system. So that intrigued me, John, that whole, as you talking about the tweaks to that system. So he's going to target X, Y, and Z to come in, because he did say there would be more players coming in. He says it doesn't need a major revamp or an overhaul, but it needs freshened up. So Niang's been brought in for a purpose, clearly. KT brought in for a purpose, but he would have brought KT in anyway. You've won a watch with KT. Just the fitness with KT is your only question mark on that deal. So I'm intrigued to see who he thinks is those players that will fit into that jigsaw and the tweaking of the system, because he's clearly saw it for himself. And Brown Warrior said, yeah, certain teams had their number. Let's no kid us or beat about the bush here. Brown Warriors are losing to Rangers. Right, because they beat Celtic twice in league games and ran them very close in the League Cup final. So let's not. That's what he's talking about, and I think the managers noticed that too. And
it's hard not to notice, isn't it? Just from going back into even when Clement was here in the latter stages of his management, and I guess we're going to see how that dynamic plays out as well. Henrik McLaughlin saying, I guess Rodgers was still managing basically Ange's team. It's changing now. And listen, I think that's to a certain extent that was to Brendan Rodgers' credit, or he could have come in and just changed everything immediately, but he did keep the system Ange had built. He obviously the majority of players are Ange's players as well, or from before Ange. But I like that he kept some sort of continuity and he didn't really just force himself onto the team. I think it was also necessary because of how difficult the first 6 months of his coming back was, and there was all sorts of issues around the team and the perception of Rodgers and the relationship between the team and the Rodgers and the support, etc. He didn't want to change too much too quickly. I think it paid off to a certain extent, and then I think everyone's right in the chat, in the live chat. I think you're right, Tony. I think Brendan Rodgers is right. Now it's time to kind of change that now, and I think the word Brendan Rodgers using is refresh. It's not a big revolution. There's not a big upheaval at Celtic this summer. It's just a refresh, isn't it? And it's starting to move forward into more of what we recognise as a familiar Brendan Rodgers looking Celtic team.
Yeah, and also as well, my father who ran amateur teams for years, he had a great expression. I've used it before. You say any manager doesn't want to put 4 gallon into 2 gallon heads. If you get what I mean. So if players are used to a certain kind of system, when Rodgers came in, he didn't do too much, as you said, with Andy's system. He kept that, and over time, he's been gradually introducing different things. And I think from the get-go this season, it'll look more like a Rodgers team, won't it? Because of the players that he's brought in, the likes. So you're looking for the likes of Engels to kick on, right?
Yeah.
You're excited by what Niang could bring. You're just up in the air in the clouds at the fact that Kieran Tierney is back.
Yeah.
We're trying to
and Rodgers reiterated that again. He spoke about Kieran Tierney. He said he spent time with Kieran Tierney during the summer, so I don't know if they were on holiday together, and I don't know what that means. But he said, I was with him during the summer, so I know firsthand as well how excited he is to be here. I'm looking forward to seeing this new version of Kieran, having had the experience in the Premier League and playing at a top club like Arsenal. He comes back here with greater maturity, both as a professional and tactically. And now we can really get the benefits of that. Sometimes top players like that might come later on in their career, but we're getting Kieran at 27 years of age. So I think the point is that Tierney's in his prime. He's had his time. He's had his apprenticeship at Arsenal, Tony. Now it's time for the big time.
I can't wait to see Kieran Tierney, because see, if you do put everything that you've learned into practice at a top club like Arsenal, you have one to watch. Because Kieran Tierney was an excellent player when he left. So those rough edges have been refined at Arsenal, and I think the whole fact that he wanted to come back, that just gives Kieran Tierney the edge, doesn't it? Every time he takes to the field, he's doing it for the supporters. He's a dyed-in-the-wool Celtic fan. I mean, that's motivation enough for someone like Kieran Tierney, because he's never been interested in like the monetary side or the fame side of football. That has come along because he's a naturally talented footballer, and he really does. And that's not lip service that he's paid to the cause. He said before, if he wasn't playing for the club, he'd be in probably amongst the Green Brigade, or certainly in Celtic Park supporting the team. So, and it's wonderful. And at 27, John, as those prime years, and I think that, I think Brendan Rodgers feels refreshed, because he even told you that he'd had a great break and he'd ate well and all that, and he'd drunk well, just different wee things like that. And I say to myself, that's a man that's content, probably not content with the way the season finished, but has gone into the summer and went, okay, I'm ready to go now. And
it's like Callum McGregor said in his first interview as well. He was up at 7 a.m, 6 a.m, or something, buzzing about the house, waiting to get back to Lennox Town, and they're desperate, I think, to. Obviously, the Scottish Cup final stings, and it stung Callum McGregor. He was on tears in the pitch. He missed that penalty. It was a blow to him. It was a blow to Rodgers to lose the Scottish Cup, having spoken about the treble for about 12 months. I note that there's no word of that kind of patter coming out of Celtic at the moment. There's no we want to win 3 trophies patter like there was at this time last year. So maybe they're going to just stay on the down low on that kind of talk until things are achieved this time. I don't know, are you reading anything into that? I just noticed a slight change of tone and all that.
Yeah, and also as well, and we've been banging on about this for ages, John. He mentioned the Champions League qualifiers. There's nothing more important to Celtic than this 2-leg playoff, one round of qualifiers for the Champions League. He mentioned that, and I think himself, no point in talking about stuff like trebles and all that if you fall at the first hurdle.
Exactly.
And that's the first major roadblock facing Celtic, and we've been speaking about it since long before the Scottish Cup final. The most important Celtic will play next season.
Yeah, it's huge. Such a huge game.
Yeah, and it defines your season. It does.
Mm-hmm.
I remember Kevin McKenna saying he didn't think it was season defining, and I disagreed with him on that, and that's perfectly fine. But for me, it's season defining, and I think the manager.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Champions League sets the entire tone for the season. I think Celtic, the mindset of the Celtic support has also shifted into this kind of European zone, especially over the last few years where we've we've been spoiled to an extent of having consistent qualification for the group stages, for the league phase, etc. I think the excitement that the league phase brought last season is undeniable, and I think we saw that, and we saw that in both the application of the players, the excitement of supporters. Once the Champions League was over, everything took a little bit of a dip, and people will argue against that, and people like to project something else sometimes, but the reality is that Europe is a big, big deal for Celtic, especially in this era where we've been so dominant domestically. It's Europe at the moment, I think, that really gets people up for Celtic right now, and that I'm not saying that's true of everyone, but I'm just, from what I observe of the majority, it feels that to be true.
And I think with that qualifier coming so early, John, the manager's right up for it, and that's why he's saying to you, no, trust me, I've got this. I'm preparing this team. We will be ready for it. And I've said, whoever we draw in the qualifiers, I would love Celtic to sail through it with the minimum of fuss in an ideal world, and just, put it to bed quickly and make sure that, they are amongst the elite again, because everybody was sustained by that. And I think the manager was certainly sustained by that. And I think that's the ... that I'm getting from that as well, because he chose to mention the Champions League in that interview. And so yeah, it's that excitement building, isn't it, for me? And, I'm excited to see who else comes in, and I'm excited to see what you've alluded to there, that those tweaks in the system. There's a lot of questions. There's more questions than answers with Celtic at the minute, isn't there, about what's going to happen this season? And because they did end the season on a low note, but it's gone, and it's now you move on, don't you? You quickly move on, and I think the manager has moved on, and I think he's getting these players into that kind of zone now.
I'll just fire through some other talking points that Brendan Rodgers raised. The point was made that the Celtic have been tracking Benjamin Niang for a while, not just in advance of this transfer window, but also in the last transfer window, and I think going into the past. So he's a player that Celtic have had their eye on for a while. Rodgers talked about that he got a recommendation from Michael Essien, who I think's a coach at Nordsjælland. I was in contact with a friend of mine there who was a top midfield player, Michael Essien. Michael works there, and he spoke really, really highly of Benjamin. And having spoken to him and seen him play, he's a leader on the pitch as a young player, but what he produces on the pitch in terms of his goals he scores, what he creates, and he's got real good physicality as well. He talked a bit about his suitability in terms of his personality coming into Celtic as well. He says he'll add to our attacking game. He's flexible in where he can play. This is interesting. He's played a lot as a number 8. He's also functioned as a wide player, but ultimately we brought him here to help us score more goals. An allusion there to what a lot of people have been discussing over the last couple of weeks in relation to Niang is that he might play in a more central area rather than... He played predominantly on the right side for Nordsjælland. The majority of his games were on the right wing, but he wasn't a right winger. He wasn't an out-and-out right winger. He was very much someone who played in the inside channels, a lot like Matt O'Reilly is what it was described to me as. Brendan Rodgers saying there, even as a number 8, he can play more centrally. So we might see him as part of that midfield 3, or, as we've been discussing, a slight formation change, and then he's at the apex of the Celtic midfield as the number 10, maybe. So interesting comments from Rodgers as well.
Yeah, and when you get a glowing recommendation from a player like Michael Essien, then you kind of sort of notice, because Michael Essien could play football, couldn't he?
He was a fantastic player. Yeah, fantastic.
So I think you take advice, and when someone like that is saying he can do various things. But John, I'm going to throw a name here. From the way Essien's talking and the way Rodgers is talking, I've got an Andy Tom vibe about Niang, for those who remember Andy Tom. Andy Tom was a wonderful gifted footballer for Celtic, and all the attention was on the three amigos, Van Hooijdonk, Di Canio and Guidetti. But Andy Tom pulled the strings, and if you ask any of those players, they will tell you that Andy Tom was a tremendously gifted footballer at Celtic and scored some wonderful goals. Everybody remembers the bullet shot at Ibrox. But
Andy Tom gave me one of my favourite ever Celtic supporter moments, Tony, when I was a young boy in the half-built Celtic Park, and Celtic played Dundee United in the Scottish Cup quarter-final. And Andy Tom was pivotal in overcoming a 1-0 deficit in the last few minutes of the game alongside Pierre Van Hooijdonk. And that was one of the formative experiences of my life supporting Celtic, and
Yeah,
that it was the most exciting game I've ever been to, I think.
and the way he took that goal, he ran through
Yeah,
the freedom of Parkhead and he stuck it away
yeah,
with the plumbing. So that you build mental pictures when people talk about players. I'm not comparing them. I'm just saying when people speak about somebody, you think who are they like? And you talk about him playing an 8 and a 10, and Andy Tom he could play anywhere in that midfield, and he was creative and he could score. So if he's anything like him, if Benjamin Negron's anything like Andy Tom, then I think Celtic, and I think Celtic deserve credit here for doing some real due diligence on this one. And doing their homework and getting to Benjamin Negron early and selling him the vision for the club and moving forward in the progress and telling him, look, you're the guy who can help us get through this qualifier and take your career onto the biggest club stage of all. And I think that's when you get a player that's willing to come and they accept that, John, then Celtic's got a lot to offer these kind of players, but you have to get them at the right time.
yeah. I agree. Just it's interesting. I think with Negrin, I think just to see where he actually does fit into the team. I guess we're going to find that out in short order too. Brendan Rodgers also talking about Callum Osman and him coming into the club. I don't want to go into too much depth because I think it's been covered on the show already this week. But Osman's interview I thought was quite impressive for a 19-year-old. Seemed very mature, very level-headed, very well spoken. I think those academies in England are pretty good in producing a player and a person ready for the demands of professional football. And Osman certainly seems to be in that category. He was nominated for Premier League 2 Player of the Season last year, scored a number of goals for the Fulham team in that division. And he seems well primed for this step to Celtic for me. And it was something alluded to by Brendan Rodgers as well. Interesting here, he had the chance to stay or go to other clubs. He decided that Celtic was going to be the best next step for him in his career. He wants to be part of the first team setup where he can come and grow and develop. Obviously here, this is what this environment is built for. We see him as a really exciting young talent. We lost a young player to West Ham, Daniel Cummings. We bring in another talent who's come in, bags of pace, scores goals, and really coveted by a number of teams. So it sounds like plenty of teams were looking to sign Callum Osman this summer. We're delighted to get Callum up here. We'll have a look at him in pre-season and see where he's at from there. The plan is to take him in, have a look, see where he's at, and then decide what his development needs to look like from there. So decisions to be made on Callum Osman over the summer. Brendan Rodgers is going to be having a really close look at him to figure out what kind of first team role he might be able to play this season. Possibility there, just from reading between the lines there, that if Osman isn't quite ready for the Celtic experience, a loan might be an option or something of that ilk. I wouldn't rule that out at this stage, but hopefully Osman can just comes in and starts impressing and training and these pre-season matches immediately, because I like the cut of his jib.
John, I think Osman might be the surprise package in this completely. And I think you'll find that he might adapt to it well. I'm hoping he does. You can't say because he's not played a minute of first team football, but that was the interview was of a boy who's ready. I think a boy who wants to become a man and play senior football, and you've got him on straining at the leash. Let's say, you say, let me at it, let me show you. And PL2 is an excellent level, John. It's tremendous, and he's been a standout there. Not just a good player, he's been a standout there. So much so that he was highly coveted, and lots of people chasing him. And again, I think Celtic deserve credit, and Rodgers especially, because the player himself said it was the Rodgers factor that made him want to come. And he's not daft. The boy will have looked on and saw the likes of Moussa Dembele, Patrick Roberts, and Matt O'Reilly, who are former Fulham Academy graduates, make a pit stop at Celtic and take their
And
career.
he spoke to Matt O'Reilly as well. He said that in his interview too. So he's well aware of that.
And Matt O'Reilly did the great selling job, didn't he?
It sounds like it.
Agent, thank you, Matt. You may be gone, but you're certainly not forgotten. And he bigged up Celtic, he bigged up the supporters, and to the point where Osman said, "Yep, that's where my future lies." He's obviously spoken to the manager, because Osman spoke about the pathway, didn't he? Another P word, John. So he mentioned the pathway. So clearly, Brendan Rodgers has said, "Look, we'll have a look at you, and if we like what we see, you'll get game time. And I think he strikes me as being that third striker that Brendan Rodgers we've been talking about.
Yeah, I
Thought
think
Johnny
I
Kenny
think
might
that
be that man.
that seems to be the plan. Yeah,
You know,
that seems to be the plan for him.
yeah. And
Rodgers,
when he gets
just to
game
round off
time, then
the oh, sorry, Tony, on you go.
no, I'm just saying when he gets game time, then it's up to him. He has to
Yeah,
impress, doesn't he?
yeah. Just rounding off the Rodgers interview. Again, you said this at the start of the show, but you did say you're obviously looking to do more transfer business. I don't think that's a great surprise to everyone, but it's just nice to hear Rodgers talk about it. He was asked, would you expect the transfer business to continue for a bit more? Rodgers says, yeah, we're not needing a major overhaul of the squad, but freshness is so important. Some of these guys have been here a long time, and it's so important, even in a winning squad, that you refresh that and reset the competition in the squad. I think there'll be hint there that there'll be outgoings as well. As I say, we've done some really good business up until now. I see us doing more and get us set up for hopefully what will be a really exciting season. Lots of work to do still, Tony. I think we need to underline that. We've been quite positive today. We've been very excited and chipper about the season ahead, but underlining all of this is that Celtic still have loads of work to do, both in moving players on and bringing players in.
Yeah, I think we look at now. We've still lots of business to be done to be Champions League ready, John. In my opinion, and so yeah, I'm excited by what has happened, but again, we caveat that with there will be players leaving, and there'll be more coming in, and I think the manager's all over this, isn't he, in terms of getting this squad prepped and ready for when that Champions League qualifier rolls around. But yeah, no, can't rest on our laurels. Still got lots of work to do, but it'll be good to get a wee gauge on Friday when the ball bounces for real, and you get your first chance to have a look at possibly the likes of Osman, maybe Niang as well. So that'll be exciting to see.
So just we're expecting Enamura any minute now, really. I think Enamura's travelled to Scotland this week. Hayato Enamura coming in as a kind of developing defender. I think he's similar to Osmond in that decisions will be made on his suitability for Celtic in the short term, and over potential loans, potential movement in terms of developing him away from Celtic initially. I think they just like Enamura's profile and are taking, they're putting that early bet on him that he was going to develop into a top player. But I'd be surprised if Enamura's coming in for the Celtic team immediately. That's just my gut feeling on that deal. But you were expecting that any moment. There's some chat. I think Legia Warsaw are interested in Hyunjin Yang, and clubs in England and around Europe also interested in Yang. So I'm not sure if that's an indication that Celtic are ready to do business on Yang. For me, I think Celtic could do with an upgrade there. I know there's a Yang gang, and I know everyone was getting happy with the way Yang was developing. I think there is a player in there somewhere, but if I'm being brutally honest, I think an upgrade there would serve Celtic well. So I guess we'll see how that plays out over the summer as well. Are you a Yang stay or go guy, Tony?
I'll be brutally honest. I wouldn't be too perturbed if he was to go, because I think he's blown too hot and cold for my liking, and I think he's been given a lot of opportunity where he hasn't taken it. He showed up in glimpses and flashes. There is, again, you say there's a player there, deep down, but I just think at times I've needed to see more from Yang, and he hasn't produced, so I wouldn't be too perturbed to see him go. Rodgers liked him, which is why he persevered with him. But yeah, if he goes, then yeah, I'm like you. I think they could get an upgrade on that. No problem at all.
And I don't think anyone should be surprised by some one or two major exits this summer. Just listen to what Rodgers said again. Some of these guys have been here for a long time, and it's so important, even in a winning squad, that you refresh that. So Rodgers basically laying out that one or two favourites are going to be moving on from Celtic this summer. That's almost guaranteed, Tony.
Yeah, and get used to that, which is fine. Yeah. That's what every squad does. Refresh. That's the buzzword, isn't it? Refresh. So I'm happy with that. I'm cool with that, to be fair.
Yeah. Just a wee bonus question here from Will Kelly that I spotted going in the chat. See if you can answer this off the top of your head, Tony. Who's everyone's all-time favourite Celtic player? I'll let you take the floor on that first if you can come up with one.
It has to be King Kenny. He was my first hero.
Nice.
of Celtic, and I was distraught when he left. But yeah, I think recency bias will take over. But there's been plenty of players that I've really liked. But I think in terms of hero worship when you're a kid,
Yeah.
it was Kieran Tierney for me.
The hero worship when I was a kid was Paul McStay.
Yeah,
Undoubtedly, he was my idol. I think latterly, I think Shinsuke Nakamura was one of my favourites of all time. Just loved watching him play.
yeah,
And in the modern over the last 10 years or so, I would probably say Callum McGregor to an extent. Kyogo, when he first arrived and burst onto the Celtic scene, was incredible as well. So, yeah,
I think Henrik
those.
Larsson featured
Of
highly.
course, I mean, yeah, it's one of those ones where it's like the question should be who's your favourite Celtic player apart from Henrik Larsson.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
also the older generation will name any one of the Lisbon Lions. I'm
yeah,
told Bobby Murdoch was a world class player. Know for a
yeah,
fact, a world class person. Jimmy Johnston as well. And even the man who sadly passed away last week, John Clark. John Clark was a phenomenal footballer. He made Billy McNeil the footballer that he was. If truth be told, and lots of older people will tell you that as well. But John Clark was the quiet, shy, retiring type. Billy was the front man. Every team needs a leader, so all these guys will. Those of an older generation will tell you that. But yeah, it's a strange question, isn't it? Because you
there's
can't
too
narrow
many.
one.
Yeah,
Yeah, if I have to, then that's the one I would go for. But yeah, there's too many to name. But yeah, I think every era spawns somebody, doesn't it? That just connects with the supporters and
Sonny, I said Nakamura. A lot of people saying Lubo Moravcik. I loved Lubo Moravcik as well, and it just makes me think: how good would it be if Celtic had a proper free kick taker in the team? That would just be some of those free kicks. I think Lubo scored one against Motherwell. I think it was Motherwell. It was Dundee. It was someone like it was a midweek game, and it was before Celtic won the league against St Mirren in Martin O'Neill's first year. And I think Celtic were pushing to wrap the league up before the SPL split as it was. It was a talking point at the time. Will Celtic do it before the split and make a mockery of this split, etc. And Moravcik popped up and scored the sweetest free kick I've ever seen in my Celtic supporting life. I've seen Nakamura, I've seen all of that, but there's something about that one. The feeling of Lubo pinging in a free kick, hurling in a free kick late on in a game in a midweek match that I was
oh,
yeah, that spent a lot of effort to get to the game and get home, and it was just a magical moment. I'd love a good free kick taken in Team 20. That's what I want to see. Brendan Rodgers should sign that player this summer.
without a doubt, there's only one free kick that tops any of those, and it's Maradona's against I think Juventus or AC Milan for Napoli when he's inside the box and he clips it. Clips it. And, you just can't see how he can get it up and over the wall and into the top corner, but he does. That's a personal favourite of mine. But any of those that you named, Liverpool's free kicks are brilliant. Naka's were, stuff of legend, weren't they? Let's be honest.
I don't think it's fashionable in the modern age to sign a player based on their free kick ability, given analytics and predictive models and all that sorts of things. But for the sheer romance of football, I say sign a free kick specialist. That's my shout.
It'd be nice to have one in the team, wouldn't it? Because we've been spoiled the past few years with guys. So, Sean Maloney could take some wonderful free kicks too.
Yeah, he could. Yeah, he could.
So we've had, we've been blessed, and even Larson himself took a few free kicks too. Won them in the bottom corner, but Lee Griffiths, somebody's just put in the comments there. Great moment in sport when Lee Griffiths bent those two free kicks in for
Trying to think of other ones. I was Stelian Petrov's scored a free kick or was laid off from a free kick against Dundee at Dens Park in the snow that I remember. That was from about it was from about 70 yards, but I'm sure it was a lot closer than that. That's another one that springs to my mind. Yeah, everyone going for the free kicks. Tony, everyone's saying.
Petrov's free kicks into the net, didn't it? I thought it was Trundler and Stephen Clough still couldn't hold it. But yeah, as you say, there's something special about someone plonking a ball down 25, 30 yards from goal. And
John Collins is another one, 90s. Free kick specialist. Another one of my early Celtic heroes.
I say that about John Collins because he did it. John Collins was one of the first to wear the Predator boots, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was, yeah.
He bent the ball into the bottom corner, didn't he? First time he went to Ibrox, and then he bent it into the top corner the second time. And I said to do it once was, people would say that was luck. I said, but to do it twice was showboating. You know what I mean?
They talk about brand activations and stuff in football these days. It's the in thing in football now. But I remember I was a little boy, and I remember how big a deal it was that John Collins was wearing Predator boots. It felt like the biggest thing in the entire world for me when I was like 8, 9 years old. Magical. We're sounding like old men here, Tony, so we'll probably wrap it up and call it a day.
Well, as somebody's just put in the comments there, David Provin's free kick, 1985 Scottish Cup final, first Scottish Cup final I was at, and Archie McPherson's commentary is ingrained in the brain. Only twice before a free kick's been scored direct from a free kick in the Scottish Cup final. Is this a little bit of history? It is. So these things just Rolodex in your mind. You know what I mean?
Tony, do you remember this one? This is triggering a memory for me, but not the one that Thomas is thinking of. Did someone not score from a Canio flick from a free kick? I think you're thinking of the one that hit. If I'm right, you're thinking of the one that hit the bar against Rangers in the game that Celtic lost 1-0.
Yeah, Celtic lost 1-0, and it was flicked up, and Di Canio rattled it off the bar, didn't he?
Yeah, I was there that day as well.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, disappointing day, but yeah, that would have been brilliant. But yeah, free kicks are just. I think Barry Robson scored with his first ever touch for Celtic, didn't he? Yeah.
What's your favourite Celtic free kick? Let's do a bit of YouTube interaction here. What is the viewers' favourite free kick? Leave it in the comments below, and we'll have a look at that. Maybe we'll do a free kick special one day or something, because I'm enjoying talking about all these free kicks. And maybe Benjamin Nigrin will be that player. Someone noted that on his YouTube highlights, the famed YouTube highlights of an incoming player, that Nigrin looks pretty handy on the free kick. So we'll see how that pans out. But yeah, thanks for joining me today, Tony. Thanks for joining us in the live show, everyone, today. We'll be back tomorrow with plenty more Celtic chat. I think I'm on with Kevin. Tony's off, so we'll have a chat then and see what today throws up from a Celtics perspective. Thanks, Tony.
Cheers. Take care.
Cheers. Bye, everyone.